The massive observation deck of Nexus Station offered a breathtaking panorama of stars, but Commander Ryan Ashford barely noticed the view. His focus remained on the diplomatic portfolio displayed on his tablet, reviewing Earth's negotiation points one final time before the alien delegation arrived. As humanity's chosen envoy to the Galactic Peacekeeping Summit, the weight of representing an entire planet rested squarely on his shoulders. "Commander, the Luminari delegation approaches," announced Lieutenant Teller, his aide. Ryan nodded, straightening his midnight blue uniform adorned with Earth's silver insignia. "Thank you, Lieutenant. Remember, the briefing emphasized their sensitivity to emotional projection. Maintain composure at all times." "Yes, sir," Teller replied, her expression carefully neutral. The delegation that entered moved with an almost supernatural grace. Four guards with iridescent skin flanked a central figure, clearly their ambassador. While humanoid in general form, the differences were striking. Her skin held a subtle luminescence that shifted between pale blue and violet, and her eyes, large, almond-shaped, and entirely silver, seemed to reflect light in ways that human eyes could not. "Commander Ryan Ashford," she spoke, her voice carrying a musical quality that standard translation devices couldn't fully capture. "I am Ambassador Valora of the Luminari High Council. We extend peaceful greetings." Ryan bowed as instructed in the cultural briefing. "Ambassador Valora, Earth welcomes you to Nexus Station. We're honored by your presence at these negotiations." As he straightened, their eyes met briefly. Something flickered across her silver gaze, so quick he almost missed it, before her expression returned to diplomatic neutrality. Had he imagined that momentary connection? "The journey through the void was lengthy," Valora said. "Perhaps we might begin with a tour of the facility before formal proceedings commence." "Of course, Ambassador, I'd be pleased to show you our operations." As they walked through the station's corridors, Ryan observed Valora's careful movements. The briefing files had emphasized the Luminari's legendary emotional control, a biological necessity due to their telepathic abilities. Without such discipline, they would be overwhelmed by their own and others' emotions. It was why negotiations with humans had been so delayed. Our species was considered emotionally loud by many psychic races. "Your species built this station in only 7 of your Earth years," Valora noted as they entered the central atrium. "Impressive efficiency." "Necessity drives innovation," Ryan replied. "After the Centauri conflict, creating neutral ground became our priority." "Yes, war often clarifies priorities." Her voice carried no judgment, merely observation. They stood side by side, watching station personnel of various species navigate the bustling atrium. The diverse collection of beings, some humanoid, others distinctly not, represented 12 different worlds. "Your thoughts are focused, Commander," Valora said suddenly, turning those silver eyes toward him. "Most humans project their emotions outward like heat from a star. You contain yours more carefully." Ryan felt a moment of surprise, his first direct acknowledgement of her telepathic abilities. "My role requires diplomatic restraint, Ambassador," he answered carefully. "Indeed, though I sense this control is natural to you, not merely professional." The personal observation caught him off guard. "You can read my thoughts." For the first time, something resembling a smile touched her lips, not quite human but unmistakably warm. "No, Commander, that would be considered deeply inappropriate without consent. I sense only emotional patterns, not specific thoughts." Relief mingled with fascination. "I appreciate the clarification." "The distinction is important to us," she said, resuming their walk. "Understanding boundaries between minds is fundamental to Luminari philosophy." As they continued the tour, Ryan found himself surprisingly comfortable in her presence. Despite representing vastly different evolutionary paths, their conversation flowed with unexpected ease. She asked thoughtful questions about Earth's history and culture, while he found himself genuinely curious about her world, a planet orbiting a binary star system, bathed in perpetual twilight. The scheduled 2-hour tour extended to 3, as they discussed everything from interstellar navigation to art forms. When they finally reached the diplomatic quarters assigned to the Luminari delegation, Ryan realized with a start that he had enjoyed himself. "These accommodations should meet your specified requirements," he said, gesturing to the suite. "The walls contain psi-dampening materials to ensure your privacy." Valora nodded. "They will suffice. Your attention to detail is appreciated, Commander." "The formal reception begins at 1900 hours. I can escort you if you wish." "That would be acceptable." She paused, those silver eyes studying him with unreadable intensity. "Until then, Commander Ryan." "Until then, Ambassador." As he walked away, Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had just occurred, something beyond standard diplomatic protocol. The Luminari were known throughout the galaxy for their reserve, their careful distance from other species. Yet in those brief hours, he sensed that Valora had shown him glimpses of something more. Lieutenant Teller was waiting at the end of the corridor. "How did it go, sir?" "Professionally," Ryan replied, keeping his voice neutral despite the unusual energy he felt. "The ambassador seems receptive to the peace process." What he didn't say, what he could hardly admit to himself, was how drawn he felt to the alien woman's presence. It was absurd, of course. Different species, different worlds, different evolutionary paths. And yet, as he returned to his quarters to prepare for the evening's reception, Commander Ryan Ashford found his thoughts continually drifting back to those silver eyes and the intelligence that shone behind them. The diplomatic mission had only just begun, but something told him these negotiations would be unlike any in his career. For better or worse, meeting Ambassador Valora had changed something, a subtle shift in the universe, perceptible only to him. 3 weeks into the peacekeeping negotiations, Commander Ryan found himself checking the time more frequently than usual. The scheduled cultural exchange meeting with Ambassador Valora was still 30 minutes away, yet anticipation hummed through him like a low-grade electrical current. "These analytics from the Rigelian sector look promising," Admiral Kerr commented, sliding a data crystal across the conference table. "Their delegates seem receptive to the proposed neutral zone." "The Luminari support has been instrumental," Ryan replied, his mind only partially engaged with the discussion. "Ambassador Valora's species carries significant weight with the Rigelian conclave." "Speaking of the ambassador," the Admiral's tone shifted slightly, "your rapport with her has not gone unnoticed." Ryan maintained his professional demeanor despite the sudden rush of warmth to his face. "Diplomatic relations require building trust, Admiral." "Indeed, though most diplomatic relations don't involve quite so many cultural exchanges after hours." The older man's expression softened. "I'm not criticizing, Commander. The Luminari have been historically isolated. Any genuine connection benefits Earth." After the meeting concluded, Ryan made his way to the station's arboretum, a vast chamber housing plant specimens from dozens of worlds. The artificial sunlight created dappled patterns across the pathway where Valora already waited, studying a flowering vine with characteristic intensity. "Earth's nightshade family," she observed without turning. "Beautiful yet containing compounds toxic to your species, a fascinating contradiction." "Many beautiful things carry risk," Ryan replied, stepping beside her. When she turned to face him, he noticed the subtle shift in her eyes, the silver iris now containing hints of blue that hadn't been present during their first meeting. According to his research, such changes indicated emotional engagement in Luminari physiology, though the briefing materials emphasized that these observations should never be mentioned directly. "Your thoughts are particularly vibrant today, Commander," Valora said, her melodic voice carrying that distinctive Luminari cadence that translation devices never quite captured correctly. "Apologies if they're intrusive." "Not intrusive, simply," she paused, searching for the right word present. They began their customary walk through the arboretum paths. What had started as formal cultural exchanges had evolved into these regular meetings, ostensibly to discuss negotiation progress, but increasingly focused on personal and cultural exploration. "I've been studying your literature," Valora said after a comfortable silence. "Your Shakespeare contains remarkable insight for a species without telepathic abilities." Ryan smiled. "Which play interested you most?" "A Midsummer Night's Dream. The concept of love as a transformative, even disruptive force is provocative." The word choice sent an unexpected shiver through Ryan. Humans have been contemplating love's disruptive potential for millennia. "On my world, emotional bonding follows strict protocols," she explained, stopping beside a small pond reflecting the artificial stars overhead. "Our psychic abilities require discipline. Unregulated emotional attachment would be chaotic." "That sounds lonely," Ryan observed, then immediately regretted the personal assessment. To his surprise, Valora didn't retreat into diplomatic formality. Perhaps it is by human standards, but safety often requires sacrifice. Their eyes met, and Ryan was struck again by how the blue flecks in her silver irises had grown more pronounced. Something unspoken passed between them, a recognition that transcended their biological differences. The station's ambient lighting dimmed slightly, signaling the transition to night cycle. Neither moved to live. "Tomorrow's negotiation will be challenging," Valora said, though her tone suggested her thoughts were elsewhere. "The Arcturian delegates remain resistant." "We'll find a solution," Ryan replied with more confidence than he felt. "We make a good team." Something flickered across her luminescent features. a micro-expression he couldn't quite interpret. Her hand, with its long, elegant fingers, moved slightly toward his before pulling back. In Luminari culture, she said carefully, proximity carries significant meaning. Standing this close to you would be considered intimate. Ryan became acutely aware of the small space between them, not touching, but close enough to feel the subtle energy that seemed to emanate from her skin. "Should I step back?" he asked, his voice dropping to just above a whisper. "No," she answered, equally soft. "I find I don't mind this proximity with you." The admission hung in the air between them, charged with implications neither was ready to address directly. Instead, they continued their walk in companionable silence, their paths through the arboretum drawing gradually closer together until their hands occasionally brushed, each brief contact sending waves of sensation through Ryan that felt disproportionate to the simple touch. As they parted that evening at the junction leading to their separate quarters, Valora held his gaze longer than protocol dictated. "Until tomorrow, Commander," she said, the formality of her words belied by the warmth in her voice. "Until tomorrow, Ambassador," he replied, watching as she moved away with that characteristic luminary grace. Only when he returned to his quarters did Ryan acknowledge to himself the truth he'd been avoiding. These meetings had become the centerpiece of his days, and his feelings for the alien diplomat had progressed far beyond professional respect or mere curiosity. Something profound was growing between them, something that diplomatic protocol had no provisions for addressing. "Incoming transmission from the Vortex vessel, Priority Alpha." Lieutenant Teller's voice cut through the tension on the command deck. Commander Ryan exchanged a quick glance with Valora, who stood beside him with characteristic composure despite the crisis unfolding around them. What had begun as routine negotiations had spiraled into potential conflict when a Vortex warship unexpectedly dropped out of hyperspace, claiming territorial violations. "Put them through," Ryan ordered, squaring his shoulders. The viewscreen flickered to life, revealing the sharp-featured visage of Captain Drex, mandibles clicking in agitation. "Your final warning, Commander. Remove all diplomatic vessels from the Vortex approach corridor, or we will consider it an act of aggression." "Captain Drex, this station maintains neutrality under Galactic Accord," Ryan responded evenly. "The corridor you're claiming wasn't designated in any previous." "Enough human equivocation," Drex snarled. "You have 30 minutes to comply." As the transmission cut, the command deck erupted into controlled chaos. Ryan turned to Valora, whose silver eyes had narrowed with concentration. "Their captain's emotional signature suggests bluster rather than true intent," she said quietly, "but there is genuine aggression beneath." "We can't risk it," Ryan's mind raced through options. "Evacuating the diplomatic quarter would take hours." "I may have an alternative approach," Valora said. "The Luminari delegation includes a senior telepath. With your permission, Commander, I could request intervention." Ryan understood immediately. Remote emotional stabilization, would that work on Vortex physiology? "It's unconventional," she admitted, "and would require proximity." 20 minutes later, Ryan found himself aboard a small shuttle with Valora and Elder Thalion, a venerable luminari whose skin glowed with a deeper luminescence than any Ryan had seen before. "This violates multiple protocols," Ryan muttered as they positioned the shuttle at the calculated focal point between the station and the Vortex vessel. "Indeed," Valora agreed, her voice betraying rare tension. "The Council will not be pleased." Elder Thalion sat cross-legged in the shuttle's center, eyes closed in concentration. The air around him seemed to shimmer with invisible energy as he extended his consciousness toward the Vortex ship. Ryan watched in fascination as beads of luminescent moisture, the luminary equivalent of sweat, formed on the Elder's brow. Minutes stretched like hours. The communication panel remained ominously silent as the deadline approached. Suddenly, Elder Thalion gasped and collapsed backward. Valora rushed to him, her hands hovering above his temples in what appeared to be a luminary healing gesture. "What happened?" Ryan demanded, dividing his attention between them and the sensors monitoring the Vortex vessel. "Connection established," the Elder wheezed. "Aggressive impulses temporarily dampened. They will reconsider their position, but I cannot maintain." "You've done enough," Valora assured him, her usually modulated voice thick with concern. The comm panel chimed. "Commander," Lieutenant Teller's voice came through, "the Vortex vessel is standing down. They're requesting to reopen diplomatic channels through proper protocols." Relief flooded Ryan's system. "Acknowledged. We're returning to the station. Have medical personnel ready for Elder Thalion." Hours later, with the crisis averted and diplomatic talks cautiously resumed, Ryan found himself in the quiet of the observation lounge. The massive viewport revealed the now peaceful vista of stars, the Vordax ship a distant, harmless speck. "You risked much today," came Valora's voice as she entered the lounge. "Your career, potentially your life." Ryan turned to her with a tired smile, worth it to avoid interstellar conflict. She moved to stand beside him, closer than their usual careful distance. Her skin glowed more intensely in the dim light of the lounge, and the blue flecks in her silver eyes had spread, creating mesmerizing patterns. "Elder Thalion will recover," she said. "He spoke highly of your courage." "And yours," Ryan replied. "Going against your protocols couldn't have been easy." Something in her expression shifted, a vulnerability he'd never seen before. "Today reminded me how quickly everything can change, how temporary our existence is." The adrenaline of the day, the relief of averted crisis, and weeks of growing connection crystallized in that moment. Ryan found himself speaking before he could second-guess the impulse. "If I kissed you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "what would you do?" Valora went utterly still. Her eyes widened, the blue flecks suddenly glowing with inner light, her species' unmistakable sign of intense emotional stimulation. For a terrible moment, Ryan thought he'd made a catastrophic cultural error. Then she leaned closer, her voice carrying a depth of feeling he'd never heard from her before. "In my culture, a kiss bonds minds, forever." Ryan blinked, uncertainty washing over him. "You mean metaphorically?" "No," she said, her gaze unwavering. "A luminary kiss involves a neurochemical exchange that permanently links psychic signatures. It creates an irreversible bond between minds." Understanding dawned. What he had intended as a moment of affection, a human expression of growing feelings, carried profound implications for her species. The weight of it struck him with sudden clarity. "I didn't know," he began, but she gently placed a finger against his lips. "I know you didn't," Valora said. "Our kind doesn't share this knowledge widely. It's why we are so careful with physical expressions of affection." Ryan's heart hammered in his chest. "And you're telling me this because—" Her luminescence intensified, bathing them both in soft light. "Because you should understand the choice before you. I don't give this lightly, human, but if you're sure—" Her voice dropped even lower. "I will never unfeel you." The enormity of her statement hung between them, an offer and a warning intertwined. Permanent psychic connection, shared emotional states, a bond that once formed could never be broken. "I need to think," Ryan managed, his voice rough with emotion. Valora nodded, stepping back. "Of course, this is not a decision to make in haste." Something like sadness flickered across her features. "Whatever you choose, Commander, working with you has been illuminating." As she turned to leave, Ryan watched her go, his mind reeling with implications. What had begun as an impulsive question had revealed depths to their connection and to her species that he had never imagined. For 3 days, Commander Ryan avoided being alone with Valora. They interacted professionally during negotiation sessions, maintaining the diplomatic facade that had become increasingly difficult to sustain. If others noticed the new tension between them, the way they carefully avoided eye contact, the deliberate distance they kept, no one mentioned it. In his quarters late at night, Ryan researched everything available about luminary bonding. The information was sparse. Their species guarded their psychic practices closely. What little he found confirmed Valora's words. The neurochemical exchange during a luminary kiss created permanent pathways between minds, allowing emotions and sometimes thoughts to flow between bonded individuals regardless of physical distance. "You're distracted," Admiral Kerr noted during their morning briefing. "The Arcturian ambassador asked you the same question twice yesterday." Ryan rubbed his temples. "Apologies, Admiral, I've had difficulty sleeping." "This wouldn't have anything to do with a certain luminary ambassador, would it?" When Ryan looked up sharply, the Admiral shrugged. "Station's not that big, Commander. People notice things." "It's complicated," Ryan admitted. "Relationships usually are, interspecies ones doubly so," Kerr's expression softened. "Whatever's going on, handle it soon. The final treaty signing is in 3 days and we need you focused." That evening, Ryan finally messaged Valora, requesting a private meeting in the Arboretum, their unofficial sanctuary. When he arrived, she was already there, her luminescent skin casting gentle light onto the surrounding foliage. "I've missed our conversations," she said simply as he approached. "I needed time to process," he replied, settling beside her on the bench overlooking the artificial pond. "What you told me, it's not something humans take lightly either." "I understand," her voice carried no judgment. "Your species values independence highly." It's not that, Ryan said, struggling to articulate the complex emotions of the past days. It's the permanence, humans, we make mistakes, we choose poorly sometimes, the idea that this decision could never be undone. That is precisely why such bonds are sacred to us, Valora explained. The irreversibility demands certainty. Starlight from the overhead skylight played across her features, highlighting the increasingly blue patterns in her silver irises. Ryan had learned enough to recognize what that meant. Her emotional investment was significant and growing. I've been authorized to establish an Earth embassy on your homeworld, he said, changing direction. And your council has approved a permanent luminary presence on Earth. Yes, she acknowledged, our work here has been successful. And after the treaty, where will you go? Something flashed in her eyes, a brief glimpse of pain quickly controlled. I will return to serve the council. My assignment here concludes with the treaty signing. The thought of never seeing her again created a physical ache in Ryan's chest. These past weeks had transformed him in ways he was only beginning to understand. What would it mean, he asked finally, his voice low. In practical terms, if I chose this bond. Valora turned to face him fully. You would feel my emotions as I would feel yours. Distance would not sever this connection. In times of strong feeling, thoughts might also transfer, though usually as impressions rather than words. The bond deepens with time and proximity. And my career, your position with the council. These bonds are rare but not unprecedented between luminari, between species, she hesitated. It would be the first in recorded history. The implications are uncertain. Ryan considered all he had learned about the luminari, their measured approach to everything, their careful emotional regulation. For Valora to even offer this possibility meant she had already accepted potentially profound consequences. Would my mind remain my own? It was his greatest fear, losing himself in the alien connection. The bond joins, it does not consume, she assured him. You would remain Ryan, but with an awareness of me always present, as I would carry awareness of you. They sat in silence, the weight of possibility between them. Finally, Ryan spoke the question that had haunted him for days. Why me? Of all the beings you've encountered across the galaxy, why offer this to a human you've known for mere weeks? Valora's luminescence intensified, bathing them both in soft light. Luminari live long lives, Commander. We meet thousands of beings across centuries, yet sometimes, she paused, choosing her words carefully, sometimes a connection forms that defies explanation. Your mind calls to mine in ways I have never experienced. Her honesty humbled him. In that moment, Ryan realized he had already made his decision, had perhaps made it days ago but needed time to accept it. I ship out in 4 days, he said quietly. After the treaty signing, back to Earth to prepare for the embassy posting. I know, she replied, a note of resignation in her musical voice. And you return to your homeworld. Oh yes. Ryan took a deep breath. If we did this, form this bond, would we have to be together physically, or could we survive the separation? Hope flickered visibly across her features, making her skin pulse with light. The distance would be difficult at first, but not impossible. The bond would sustain us until circumstances allowed reunion. He nodded slowly, processing, I need one more night to be certain. Valora rose gracefully. Certainty is essential, Ryan. It was the first time she had used his name without his title. I will await your decision, whatever it may be. As she left, Ryan remained in the Arboretum, surrounded by life from a dozen worlds somehow thriving together in this artificial environment. The metaphor wasn't lost on him. What was he really afraid of? Not the connection itself. He had already begun to feel bound to her in ways that transcended normal human attachment. Was it the vulnerability, the knowledge that his emotional state would never again be entirely private? Or perhaps he realized as the station's night cycle dimmed the lights around him, it was the fear that he would be the one found wanting, that she would glimpse the depths of his human complexities, his contradictions, insecurities, and flaws, and regret her offer. As he finally returned to his quarters, Commander Ryan Ashford knew that by morning, his answer would be clear. Some decisions, once contemplated, make themselves. The final day of negotiations had concluded with unprecedented success. 12 species had signed the Galactic Accord, establishing the framework for lasting peace across 3 sectors. The station's grand hall buzzed with diplomats and officials celebrating what many had deemed impossible mere months ago. Commander Ryan moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations with practiced grace, while his eyes continually sought a particular luminescent glow among the diverse gathering. He hadn't spoken privately with Valora since their meeting in the Arboretum, though he'd made his decision hours after their conversation. Quite the achievement, Commander, Admiral Care said, appearing at his side with 2 glasses of champagne. Earth's council is beyond pleased. Ryan accepted the drink with a nod. The Luminari contribution was critical. Their reputation provided the credibility we needed. Speaking of which, the Admiral gestured subtly toward the entrance. Your counterpart has arrived. Valora stood in the doorway, her formal attire unlike anything Ryan had seen her wear before. The flowing garment seemed woven from light itself, shifting colors with her movements while accentuating the natural luminescence of her skin. The customary Luminari restraint was evident in her composed features, but when her silver-blue eyes met his across the room, Ryan felt the connection like a physical touch. If you'll excuse me, Admiral, he said, setting down his untouched champagne. Of course, something knowing flashed in the older man's eyes. Sometimes diplomacy requires personal attention. Ryan made his way across the crowded hall, diplomats and officials parting before him with respectful acknowledgments. When he finally reached Valora, the surrounding conversation seemed to fade into background noise. Ambassador, he greeted formally, aware of curious eyes upon them. The celebration would be incomplete without the Luminari delegation. Commander, she responded, her melodious voice carrying that distinctive cadence he had grown to cherish. Your achievement today will echo through generations. Our achievement, he corrected. Would you walk with me? There's a viewpoint nearby that offers a remarkable perspective on the stellar nursery. Understanding passed between them. With a graceful nod, Valora fell into step beside him as they exited the grand hall. Neither spoke as they traversed the curved corridor leading to the small observation deck Ryan had discovered weeks earlier, a secluded space overlooking the spectacular cosmic birth of new stars. When the door sealed behind them, they were alone among the stars. Your mind has been quiet, Valora said softly, moving to the viewport. I couldn't sense your decision. I've been practicing the mental exercises in the cultural documents you shared, Ryan admitted. I wanted to tell you myself, not have you sense it prematurely. The blue patterns in her silver irises expanded as she turned to face him fully. And have you decided, Commander? I have. Ryan moved closer, close enough to feel the subtle energy that always seemed to emanate from her skin. Before I tell you, I need to know something. The bond, does it translate across species correctly? Will you truly feel what I feel, or will there be miscommunication? The bond adapts to neural patterns, she explained. While our physiologies differ, emotions carry universal signatures. You might experience my feelings differently than another Luminari would, but the essence remains true. He nodded, processing this final piece of information. And afterward, practically speaking, with you returning to your homeworld and me to Earth. Distance will be challenging, she acknowledged. But the connection, once established, transcends physical space. When emotions are particularly strong, we may even glimpse thoughts across light years. Ryan took a deep breath, his decision solidifying with each passing moment in her presence. Then I've made my choice. Valora's luminescence intensified slightly, betraying her emotional state despite her controlled expression. And that is. Let's stop pretending we don't feel it, he said simply. For a heartbeat, she remained perfectly still. Then, with deliberate slowness, she raised her hand to his face, her long fingers hovering just above his skin without touching, the Luminari equivalent of profound intimacy. You understand that once done, this cannot be undone, she whispered. Our minds will be linked until death. I understand, he replied with certainty. I want this, I want you. The blue in her eyes flared brilliantly as she stepped closer. The process begins with touch and completes with what your people call a kiss. Once initiated, it cannot be halted. Ryan nodded, his heart hammering against his ribs. I'm ready. With exquisite gentleness, Valora's fingers finally made contact with his temple. The sensation was electric, warm energy seeming to flow from her fingertips into his skin. Her luminescence brightened until she appeared to glow from within, bathing them both in ethereal light. Open your mind to me, she whispered, her face now inches from his. Don't resist what comes. Ryan relaxed the mental barriers he'd maintained through years of diplomatic training. As their foreheads touched, he felt the first tendrils of her consciousness, like warm water flowing into spaces he hadn't known existed within his mind. When their lips finally met, the universe exploded behind his eyes. Colors he had no names for, emotions with textures and dimensions he'd never conceived. Memories that weren't his, a childhood beneath twin suns, the sacred rituals of psychic awakening, centuries of carefully controlled existence suddenly shattered by the intensity of what she felt for him. Simultaneously, he felt his own consciousness pouring into her, his human experiences, the complex tapestry of his emotions, his fears and hopes, and the growing love that had brought him to this moment. The kiss deepened, and with it the bond, no longer two separate minds reaching toward each other, but a continuous flow between interconnected consciousness. Different but joined, separate but never again alone. When they finally parted, Ryan gasped at the sensation that remained, a warm presence in his mind, distinct yet integrated with his own thoughts. He could feel her emotions as subtle currents beneath his own, wonder, joy, and something deeper that had no simple human translation. "Is that," he began, struggling to articulate the extraordinary sensation. "Yes," Valora whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "That is me, and I feel you as well." She brushed away moisture from his cheek, tears he hadn't realized he'd shed. Her touch was different now, carrying echoes of sensation that reverberated through both their minds. "It's beautiful," he managed. "I never imagined." "Nor I," she admitted, her characteristic reserve completely dissolved. "The bond between species, it's more vivid than our records suggested, more complete." Through their new connection, Ryan sensed her wonder matched his own. The bond hummed between them, adjusting and settling like an instrument finding its perfect tuning. "What happens now?" he asked, though part of him already knew the answer. "Now we face the future," Valora said, her fingers intertwining with his another first. "Together, though apart for a time, the bond will sustain us until circumstances allow reunion." Ryan nodded, feeling the truth of her words and the connection they now shared. Distance would be difficult but bearable with this constant awareness of each other across the void. "I'll expedite the embassy establishment," he said, "and petition for permanent assignment. And I will inform the council of our bond," she added. "It will cause considerable reaction, but it may also open doors previously closed between our peoples." As they stood together at the viewport, their newly formed bond pulsing between them, the stellar nursery beyond erupted in a brilliant flash, a new star bursting into existence at the precise moment of their union. Neither believed it coincidence. Commander Ryan Ashford and Ambassador Valora of the Luminari had crossed an unprecedented threshold. Their personal choice would have consequences that rippled beyond them, potentially reshaping relations between their species forever. But in that moment, watching the newborn star's light reach them after traveling across the cosmos, they felt only the wonder of their connection, two beings from different worlds who had found each other across the immeasurable void and forged something entirely new. The bond between them hummed with possibility, a bridge across differences that had once seemed insurmountable. Whatever challenges awaited, they would face them not as human and luminary, but as something the galaxy had never seen before, a union of minds that transcended the boundaries of species and space. Their journey had only just begun.